Welcome to another episode of Edge Grip Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm just going to read a part of his resume before before I say who he is. He began racing motorcycles at the age of 6. He was the CEO of two, not one, but two electric vehicle companies, Rawrr and Volcon. Rawrr? I mean, it doesn't have an engine. Why Rawrr? But never mind. He worked for Bonnier, which owned, I think, 11 magazines, something like that. He was the vice president of Laguna Seca. So I hope that means free laps. He was the managing partner of a company called Hardcard Holdings, which did sponsorship management and athlete management, mostly for the racing industry. He is a board member of the Motorcycle Industry Council. He held leadership positions in Ducati and Alpine Stars. And he also managed to do a year in MotoGP as a rider on a NSR RS 250R Honda for Team Katayama, 1989. Can you guess who he is? Can you guess, Nabil? Of course you can.
That could be Andy Leisner.
Oh, hello, Andy.
The one and only.
What a guess. It's just on the tip of everyone's tongue, I'm sure. Yeah, and there's one, I have to make one correction there, although I am good friends with the leadership of Ducati and Alpine Stars. I did not work for Ducati and Alpine Stars, unfortunately, but
What?
Gabriele, Jason, well, so
It was in a press release that I took it from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's the first time Gal research ever failed.
Oh, really?
Well, the internet is always
Spot on.
accurate 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Been in and around those companies for a very long time. I was an Alpine Stars sponsored rider back when Gabriele was doing the sponsorships essentially himself, and now he runs the whole empire.
So how are you, Andy?
I'm well, thanks. I'm well. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining. We're
Yeah.
excited of having you. So, do you want to start a little bit with the career and maybe some highlights and fond memories or fun memories?
Before
Yeah.
that, what's
Yeah.
that show behind you?
Oh, that's the Shoei Andy Leisner replica back. I was sponsored by Shoei when I was racing, and although they never, and I had a paint job that a young Shoei designer actually put together for me. He made me a couple options, and he did that one. And then I raced with it the years I was racing when I was done racing. And then the president of Shoei just a few years ago, I think that's an X14. When that came out. He presented me with one in my old colors, so that was really nice of them.
That's cool.
They're a great company, make great helmets, and yeah, that's a piece I put on display. It doesn't get ridden much.
That is cool. Yeah, because there's only one.
Yeah, yeah, I went through a lot of those back when I was racing, but yeah, I don't plan to crash from that one. But as far as my background, yeah, I grew up riding motorcycles here in Southern California. My dad got me a motorcycle when I was 6. He was a flat track racer and a scrambles racer, and bought me a little two-stroke Chibi 60 to ride at 6. I was terrified of it. It was horrifying. It was a 60cc two-stroke Bridgestone engine. There's a clutch, 3-speed with a clutch. All my friends rode Z50s, and I had this thing. They didn't have to have you use a clutch. Nobody uses a clutch nowadays at that age, and it scared the pants off of me. But the people I have to credit for getting me to ride it more and faster were a gentleman, 2 kids I rode with, a guy named Tom Kendall, and the late Jeff Krosnoff and Tom. And Tom went on to be a very successful car racer. We were neighbors, and then we were also neighbors with Jeff. And Jeff went on to become an IndyCar driver. Unfortunately, Jeff was killed in an IndyCar in 1996. but it was those guys. If it wasn't for those guys ripping around on their Z50s, I probably would have parked my GB60, not ridden that thing anymore. So, um, and then raced motocross for a few years, local motocross, mostly Indian Dunes, De Anza here locally, um, and then uh, I lived right at the base of the Angeles Crest Highway, um, and when I was in high school, I had an RD 400, and we used to take runs up Angeles Crest Highway, and one of the guys I rode up and down with raced, and he said, "You got to come out to Willow Springs sometime and try that." So did that, and I fell in love.
Like most of us.
Yeah.
I accidentally took what I thought was going to be a rider improvement course, and it was racing school.
Mhm.
I didn't know that because I don't read often. So I ended up same thing, trying it for a weekend with California Superbike and fell
Yeah.
in love.
Yeah.
The rest was
Yeah.
history.
Yeah,
Technic-
it's intoxicating, and I liked it because it was road racing as opposed to motocross, which is just a lot of guts and physical fitness and such. Road racing was more calculating. It was more of a math problem. How you got around the racetrack fast, and obviously you had to have some riding ability. But I just enjoyed sort of like the math side of things. I love setting up gearboxes. This is back before we had data acquisition. So sat with a track map and a calculator and a RPM chart with all your different gearbox choices. Love that kind of stuff. And yeah, but road racing was great. I think I finished like everybody. I finished dead last of my first race, but a couple races later was winning.
what do you mean like
Oh, wow.
everybody? I didn't finish dead
Well-
last in the first race.
Okay, well maybe not everybody.
I finished fourth out of four.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Out of four.
Oh, out of four.
Yeah, my first race was CVMA, I think, and same thing. There was a bunch of amateurs just getting into racing. So, we got lapped by the fast guy, and then I lapped the slowest person when I was like second slowest, and
That's fantastic.
nobody was going really fast
Yeah,
except like the
yeah.
first guy or two.
Yeah.
It was a blast still.
And
Yeah, it's great, and it was at Willow Springs, back in Willow Springs, I look back on that was a fast track, fast track, and on 250s our average speed was over 100 miles an hour a lap, so back 35 years ago we were going over 100 miles an hour a lap, and turn 8 was wide open and top of 6. That was challenging, but really enjoyed it. Those were great days. Club racing, it's AFM South, ARRA. Those are long gone, unfortunately, but good times.
And you were one of the lucky ones that after your motorcycle riding career took off, or maybe wind down, you switched to the business side of it, and you made a career out of being in the business side of the motorcycle industry. And you're one of the lucky ones that have that experience from both sides. You're a manager, but you're also a rider. You're a VP or a CEO, but you also know how to ride the heck out of what you're selling. So how did that transition come about, where someone went like, "Hey, come work for us, and let's see what you can do in the business world"?
Yeah, it was a lot like racing. I just was really determined. When in 1988, I was doing really well here in the AMA Nationals, and I was just determined to go to Europe, and I didn't want to wait. And I took a flight over to the Milan show in Italy, EICMA, which it is called now, and I just met people and got a ride for 1989. It was just determination, and then my racing career ended unfortunately in 1990 with a big crash at Daytona that left me at 23 years old with a hip replacement, probably the youngest hip replacement recipient ever. But that took me out of racing, but I was just determined to continue working in the motorcycle business, and just banged on doors. And actually my two opportunities right out of school, good friend Ken Boyko, who worked for years at DG and then ended up founding Cobra Engineering, a very successful exhaust pipe manufacturer. But when I was in the hospital in Daytona for 10 days, and On the same lap that I crashed, just prior to me crashing, was Gary Cowan crashed, and Gary Cowan was an Irish racer who was riding for Kenny's team that year, and Gary was an amazing rider. Just I had ridden in the Grand Prix with him the year prior, and amazing rider and a great person. And he was paralyzed in his accident. So Kenny was at the hospital for a lot of that time, Kenny Roberts, and he come up to my floor and sit with me, and we talk a lot. And so after I got out of the hospital, and a couple months later, Kenny called me up and offered me a job with his team. So I worked with his team for a year, and then just continued in the motorcycle business, and I love it. It's such a great industry with great people. We're all in it because we're passionate about the sport. We're not working for a toilet paper company where we're just in it because it's a job. We're here because we love it, and I've just been really fortunate to have a number of great positions there.
That's terrific. And then you did a year in MotoGP. How was
Yeah.
that experience?
Yeah, so that was 1989. It was interesting. It was interesting. Over here in America, I was beating Cork Bollington, who won 4 world championships, and Alan Carter and Jimmy Felice, who won a Grand Prix that year, and at Laguna Seca. And I thought, oh, I can go over to Europe, and I'm going to clean up over there. And he got over there, and the Europeans you see it nowadays in Moto3 and Moto2. The young Europeans are so fast, and they've ridden all those tracks for years, and I'd never seen them. And I always, Keith Code was a mentor of mine, and I was always about getting the drive off the corner, reference points for turn in, but just concentrate on that drive off the corner, get the maximum speed out on the straights. So I jump on the brakes. I'll never forget in Austria, jump on the brakes, and I'm braking, and August Auinger goes by me still under the bubble, wide open, 50 meters later gets on the brakes. So they were so good at braking. They're so good at riding that front tire, and they still are today. Moto3, Moto2, it's just amazing. So super competitive, super difficult. I was on a stock RS 250. My teammate Denny Amatrian was on a NSR 250, a factory bike. So stock bike was tough, and they would give 60 riders starts. So 60 riders would try to attempt to qualify for the 35 grid positions. And so just qualify, and every session was timed. So every session was a qualifying session. And if you didn't go a little bit faster every session, you go backwards 10 places. And just making the race was just a bonus. Qualifying was the most challenging part. And it was an amazing experience, though. I grew up a lot, learned a lot of different cultures, traveled. This is in Europe. This is before the Iron Curtain fell. I raced in Yugoslavia. It was a fascinating experience to see that. It was just amazing experiences that really helped me sort of with life and business beyond that. But on the track, whew, it was hard. You see, and it gives me so much respect. I see Cam and Joe Roberts go over there and race Moto2. People are thinking, oh my gosh, they're finishing. They're just barely getting into the top 10. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. It is so challenging with the Spaniards and the Italians, and additionally, you think, oh, Moto2, it's a spec class, every bike's the same. It's not the same. All the chassis manufacturers have different advantages, and the budgets of the team. The engines may be the same, but that's where it begins and ends. I just, for what Joe's doing over there and what Cam did, especially with Cam's sort of jumping right into the fire there, that was super impressive. We should all here in America be proud of that.
Yeah, I don't think
Well,
people
that's great to
understand.
hear.
Yeah, I don't think people understand what it is to go hop on a plane, go to a track you've never seen before, a team that you've never seen before, a motorcycle that you've never seen before that acts nothing like what you're used to, and then you have maybe that little pride of, hey, I'm a US champion, and then you just it's very, very difficult. Not a lot of people did it successfully.
Yeah. It
And
was.
you're
Mhm.
sorry. No, I'm saying, like you said earlier, competing with them on tracks they're born riding. 5-year-old,
Yeah,
they're riding those trucks already. They know every little trick and shortcut you can imagine.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and, and if this asphalt's in the shade versus the sun, what to do on that corner. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's almost an unfair advantage. We had this question actually a little further down, but might as well transition into
Mhm.
it now. Was um, see, you guys are doing great. We're so proud of them. But how do we get more American racers to get in the world championships? I mean,
Yeah.
there was an era, a golden era, where US was dominating, and then all of a sudden, we're lucky if we get one or two riders in the top 10.
Yeah. 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 It, Moto America is doing great. First of all, Moto America, I'm so happy with what Richard Varner and Chuck Axel and Terry Cargis have done with that property, and they've really transformed motorcycle racing here in America. But still, the competition level, at Moto America, is nowhere near what you're seeing in the European Championships or just the Spanish Nationals or Italian Nationals. And I hate to say it, but the necessary evil is you got to go over there really young and just start racing CEV or racing something, racing a Moto 3 bike, over in Europe. And it's also racing, a true racing bike and not a production bike, because they're so different.
Mm.
And I wish it wasn't. In the old days, you could run AMA Superbike, like Eddie and Freddie and everybody did, run AMA Superbike and get dropped on a good 500 over there and immediately be up in front. But no one's getting rides going straight into 500. It's not 500, straight into MotoGP. You gotta win a Moto 3 World Championship and a Moto 2 World Championship, and then maybe get into MotoGP. No one's going straight into MotoGP nowadays. So, and to get in a good Moto 3 ride or even a Moto 2 ride, you gotta just be seen over there, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
I hope that would change. I was when I came back from Europe, one of the things that amazed me when I was there is the Italian Federation, the Spanish Federation. They all ran teams in the what was then the 125 and the 250 World Championship, and for development riders, giving young, top Italian riders a shot. I was racing against a guy named Fausto Ricci who actually did very well. He rode for Team Italia. It was sponsored by the Italian Federation. And I talked to the AMA about it. I said, you guys, what we really need is we need an AMA funded team over there that we can feed our best riders into, on 125s or 250s. But it's enormously expensive, and unfortunately, the AMA membership dues, we're not gonna support endeavor like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to your
And that's going
point,
to take money. And
uh,
sorry, go ahead, Gal.
to your point. So 2 points. One is, yeah, you're absolutely right that they need to start on a Moto 3, and you see who's winning Moto America. Or almost everybody that's winning is a prodigy of the Red Bull Rookie Cup. So
Yeah.
they started young. And the second point is, you're saying they're so fast over there, but when someone comes over here, they see how fast we are over here. So
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
experiences
And
mean
we're
a
pretty
lot.
fast. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are pretty fast. Yeah, and you look at Petrucci when he came over here. I thought, and he did pretty well. He had good equipment though. But um, and the other thing is our tracks are so dangerous compared to European tracks, and it's a whole nother world when you come over here and you've got bumps. There are no bumps in Europe. You come over here and you get bumps, and you got guardrails and walls, and they're much better than when I was racing, but they would never, the majority of the tracks that we race on in the United States would never ever be able to get homologated by the FIM for road racing, for any kind of world championship event. So uh, cost us at Laguna Seca millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to move mountains, to basically be safe enough for MotoGP. So yeah.
You
So I think
also
when the Europeans get over here and they're running around next to walls, it's a little different. little different experience.
What's the deal
Yeah.
with the noise in Laguna Seca? You have to change the
Yeah, yeah.
exhaust
So
or
back when I was there, and I think it's still the same, but Laguna, the area surrounding Laguna Seca has very nice homes, and people are building homes all around there, and the Laguna Seca, thankfully, is a county park. It's a Monterey County park, and if it wasn't, Laguna Seca would have been gone years ago. But it happens to be the highest revenue producing park in Monterey County. So it's remained a racetrack. But the residents that move in, they have to sign a document that says, I understand that 5 weekends a year there will be noise coming from this racing facility. Only 5 weekends a year are they allowed to be over a certain dB. The other,
Right.
if you guys have done track days there, you've got to have quiet exhaust on your bike. So the residents sign this. Still, though, on those race weekends, especially when MotoGP hit there, that's the noisiest that place has ever been when the MotoGP bikes first hit Laguna Seca. We had to have one person on the phones just taking all the angry calls from the local residents about the noise that was coming from the facility. So
should have route those calls to me. The answer would be shut up, move out. It's like buying a house in Simi Valley. You have to sign that you're going to get cancer. So
yeah.
it's like you're buying a house next to a racetrack. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, I know, but those are not cheap homes, and the residents didn't feel well about listening to that on weekends. I think it's music to my ears, but to them it wasn't.
Yeah. So, talking a little bit about the Red Bull Rookie Cup, Moto America brought it here. I don't think it's running anymore, and they did 1 or 2 seasons
Yeah.
only.
It still runs. It'll still run in that first couple of years was great because they had the Rookies Cup, they had the domestic and the International Rookies Cup, and a very very good friend of mine, JD Beach, and the Hayden, excuse me, the Gillum brothers raced that, and it was great because it was on Grand Prix equipment. And when JD went over, I think it was 2008, I think 2007, 2000. JD won the Red Bull Rookies, the Red Bull Rookies Cup
Mhm.
international championship in 2008, which was astounding. That's an amazing achievement because he beat a lot of guys that are racing MotoGP nowadays. And but yeah, it's too bad that we don't have that domestic version of it on that equipment, and that we also are not getting anybody over there on the international version of it.
Yeah, that would be a good platform to get people maybe to race proper racing bikes and get noticed over there.
Yeah, it would be great to have a fleet of KTM Moto 3 bikes that kids could ride here. Yeah.
Yep. Right. And then, so on your own MotoGP career, any crazy stories from the paddock?
You want to get it? You want to get into it right away? Come on.
Get it early.
Yeah, they're the worst one for me was I never forget. I really started to finally get into the groove and learn how to ride the front end as hard as the Europeans did, sort of mid-season on, and I just come off a really great Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, and we were at Rijeka. No, we weren't at Rijeka. Excuse me. This was later in the season. This was at in Sweden, the Swedish Grand Prix, and
Mhm.
I had crashed a lot that year. I had crashed a lot. I held the record for most crashes in the World Championship until a couple years later, Alex Curvier beat it. But back then, I think I crashed 23 times in that season. But in Sweden, I qualified really, really, really well. Qualifying wasn't done yet. It was probably maybe the third session, and I was firmly in the show in the middle of the pack, which was really good for me and our bike. And my team was really excited. And at Onderstorp, you would do plug chops. These are the days again before data acquisition. You do a plug chop where you go wide open down a long straightaway, and then pull in the clutch and hit the kill button and kill the motor, and then coast to a stop. And then the mechanic would look at the spark plug and read the ring around it, around the electrode, and he could tell if it was running too rich or too lean, at least on the main jet. That was the science of tuning back then. So we did a plug chop down a 6-gear long straight down, which was essentially an airport runway. And at the end, we couldn't coast all the way back to the pits. Normally you do it, you could sometimes coast back to the pits, but we had to stop there and we had to wait. And the truck would come, put a bunch of bikes in the back of the truck, and then they'd have ropes tied to the stakes on the side, and they'd throw ropes off the side for other riders to grab a rope and just get towed in. So you got a truck full, maybe 20 bikes, and then you got a half a dozen ropes hanging off the back with people hanging onto them, and it made a couple trips. So I tried to get up onto the truck, and I couldn't get it. All the ropes were taken, and at the very last minute, someone throws out one more rope. I grab it, and then the truck starts to pull away, and I realize I've got the rope in my right hand, and I didn't use the rear brake, and my rear brake didn't work. That was how I didn't want to ever touch it. So here we go, and I'm holding a rope, and I just thought as soon as this truck, puts on the brakes for the first time, I'm going to the back of it because I can't grab my front brake. So I try to do a switch, hand to hand with the rope as this truck is pulling us down the track. And as I do it, the loop on the end of the rope catches my handlebar, pulls the bike out from under me, and I go sliding down the road, and the truck drives probably, I don't know, 300 meters down the road, towing my motorcycle on its side. Well, everybody in the back is screaming and yelling and banging on the roof of the truck, and it just keeps driving down the road with my motorcycle on it. So finally we get the truck stops, and we get into the pits, and my team is so excited that I qualified really well. They look at the motorcycle and it's completely destroyed.
But they can still pull out the plug.
Yeah. They got a great plug chop though. Yeah.
So were you able to race?
Yeah, well, actually I was not able to race because in the last qualifying session, I was drafting Paolo Casali down that same long straight. I needed to draft somebody to get a good lap time because my bike was slow, and I pulled out of the draft, and my poor friend Harold Eckel, German, was just touring at the time, looking for a spot, to jump in and do a fast lap. And I went into the back of him at full speed and top of 6th gear, and my front brake hit his tail section. And I just went end over end, tumbled down the road, and I broke my collarbone again. It was the second time I'd broken that season. And but I'll never forget Carlos Lavado, former world champion. He came to my pit after, sitting in my pit after the accident. And I was okay, except for the broken collarbone. And he came up and he said, "Oh, thank God." And, Dios mío. He said, "Oh," he said, "I saw this." He said, "I thought for sure that person is dead. For sure that person is dead," because he was behind us when the accident happened. And
it wasn't your fault. If he was coasting in front of you on a racetrack, it was not your fault.
Yeah, I know, but that's that was the thing, and it still happens today. You guys see this in MotoGP today. You couldn't do in 250s back then, unless you were on a Honda NSR, because those were the fastest bikes. But you couldn't do a fast lap on your own. You had to do a good qualifying lap. You had to get the draft to somebody. So it was like a chess match of touring around, just trying to wait and look and find the right gap or find the right person to draft off of, and then you jump under the bubble and just go for it. Guys. I had the opportunity, I think it was his last season when I was there, Tony Mang, again, multi-time world champion. he had this amazing ability to just go around and just look around and at like at 20% of the pace. You get in trouble for this now, but just putting around, and then two corners from the end, he puts his head down and puts in a lap that is a record-breaking lap. And so of the maybe 15 laps he does in practice, maybe two are fast. The rest are at like a snail's pace. It was really amazing to see the Europeans with that ability.
Oh, interesting. And any colorful stories on characters in the paddock? I mean, those are the good old days where you actually people had personalities, no?
Yeah, yeah. I remember, I remember the Kevin Schwantz that year. They gave all the top Porsche. We were at where were we at the German Grand Prix, and then went to the Austrian Grand Prix, I believe. No, yeah, I believe we were at the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. No, excuse me, Hockenheim, and then we ended up going to Salzburgring, which is one of my favorite tracks of all time. And Porsche gave all the top 500 riders 911s to drive, to make the drive up there in, and so they all and I just remember coming. I did very well in that race, one of my better races, and we had a great night out, fun night out. And I just remember coming back to the track, to the motorhome, and there's Kevin's little Suzuki Samurai with a rope tow on it, trying to pull his 911 out of this ditch that he had somehow driven it into. And the little Suzuki Samurai was having no headway whatsoever. It was a Samurai or sidekick. He kept it in a trailer behind his motorhome. No way we were going to get that 911 out of there, but trying their hardest to get that out of there before anyone noticed.
Yeah. Nowadays, everybody's being super sanitized.
Yeah,
When they act, when they speak.
Randy Mamola. There was also at Hockenheim. There's a bar in the middle of the restaurant. Nowadays, the GP teams are so isolated and nobody talks to either. But back then it was pretty open. The teams talked to each other. Some of us had dinner with other team mechanics and things, and it was a much more open atmosphere. And there's an actual pub in the middle of the racetrack there. And I'll never forget, Randy Mamola having a beer or two, the night before the GP. That stuff doesn't happen anymore.
I remember trying to get a photo with one of the GP racers current, and we were at the after party, so that we had drinks in the hand. He's like, no, we don't take photos with alcohol. It gives a bad example.
Not even a person with him.
No, he was holding a drink too, but
he
same
was.
thing.
Oh,
But
okay,
yeah,
good. Yeah, yeah,
we're supposed to portray a good example for the youth, so no alcohol.
yeah, yeah.
Randy Mamola, I think that
Yeah.
was the most popular rider that never won a championship. I think so.
He was so popular that year that I was there. He was on the Kajiva, and he would he just do wheelies all the time in the crowd. You could tell where it was at Assen. You could tell wherever Momola was on the track, because the crowd was cheering. The leaders would be over here, but Momola would be back a little ways, and you could hear the crowd cheering, whenever he went past.
Yeah, the videos are still up there of him sliding and wheeling,
spinning the tire up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a fun style. So now maybe then a little more about the industry. You've been a leader in that industry for a long time. I mean, what do you see happening? I mean, you look at bike sales. Some companies are doing better than others. Some are pulling models, or complete lines off of this sale floor. Electric bikes are a thing, not yet a big thing, but it's. I now start seeing some of them around, but bicycles more than actual
Bikes,
proper motorcycles. What do you see happening in the industry, and where are things going? Do you think it's developing for the better? Are we going to see a resurgence? Are young people going to start riding bikes?
Yeah, yeah. We used to study this a lot at the Motorcycle Industry Council when I was on the board there, and I was on a committee to try to help grow the sport. It sort of morphed into what they call, I believe it's Ride With Us now, the Moto Intro, where they take people and give them a quick little experience on a motorcycle. But what we saw, we were very worried about millennials and that generation. They didn't want sport bikes. Gen X just wanted sport bike, sport bike, sport bike, sport bikes, nothing but sport bikes, and then all of a sudden, sort of the millennial generation didn't want sport bikes. They wanted something else. They wanted, and that's when we got sort of the retro, some of the retro standards, and standards became more popular. So I was sad to see sport and race attendance dropped. And that saddened me because that sort of win on Sunday, the U.S. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday sort of went away. So that was disappointing. Off-road has remained strong. We had the 2008 recession, which just destroyed our industry. We more than halved it in the course of 1 year, and then we sort of clawed back after that. And I'll never forget 2020 when in March, April, we were in the MIC board meeting, and we were just ready for the sky to fall. We thought, this is it. This is 2008 all over again, or worse. And the exact opposite happened, which was great. From the power sports industry as a whole. Not just street bikes. But what I see is one, we have I think that our biggest opportunity with the space right now and to get more people into motorcycling is happening very organically with the products that I worked on in the segment that I worked in my last position with the lightweight electric segment. So these are Surons, Rawrs, that's the brand that I was the CEO of, and then Talaria. These are lightweight electric. Some people call them e-bikes. They're not e-bikes. They've got foot pegs, not pedals. They go 55 miles an hour. They're not e-bikes. They're remote. The government sees them as motorcycles. We have so many young people. Nearly 100,000 unit sales in that category happening right now. So many young people entering motorcycling through that channel where they wouldn't enter anywhere else. And they wouldn't go out and buy a street bike or a dirt bike, and they're maybe don't want to learn how to use a clutch right away, and on those things they just twist and go. They're inexpensive, they're light, easy to ride, fast. So I see that segment blowing up, and I really think we need to. The motorcycle industry shunned that segment a little bit, but now is starting to realize, hey, these are guys that are going into motorcycle dealers. They're buying a moto helmet. They're buying like an Alpine Stars, maybe an enduro jacket, some moto gloves. They're spending money in our business. They're learning how to ride a motorcycle. Let's convert them to be a lifelong motorcyclist. So that's something that I want to try to work on. And we looked at creating everything I always like to try to do to work things into racing, but create racing series for these kids. They want to go out and have fun, and they want to go fast, and they want to beat their buddies. It's a very community oriented sport. They travel in packs, they ride in packs. We need to create some real racing properties for them. And I'll tell you one thing. We set up a Rawrr Mantis and Supermoto setup, and there is nothing more fun than one of those lightweight electric bikes on a go-kart track and Supermoto setup. So that's my hope for the future.
Well, that's actually a very good plan, because also the kart tracks are more available, much cheaper to access. You can literally show up, pay, and start riding and share time with karts.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them. That makes it very accessible for people to try to do something like this. If somebody was to do a series, some organized racing series around a bunch of kart tracks.
Absolutely. Just the nature of electric power plants, in this lightweight electric segment, they make no noise. So you can ride them in places that you couldn't. We used to set up a little course in the parking lot and rip around our parking lot, and no one would care. So that's the other thing. Road racing, unfortunately, you got to load up the van and or the pickup or whatever, and drive an hour and a half out of town, or at least we do here in Southern California, to get to go out and be able to ride a road race bike. But if we could set up opportunities for people to ride here, in cities, I think it would really help our sport grow.
And are they buying them for fun, or are actually people starting to commute on those?
Well,
Because it's a great commuting solution.
it is. The problem is, Sur-Ron created that category, but sort of by accident. They made this funky thing, back 6 years ago, that it wasn't a motorcycle, it wasn't a full-size dirt bike, but it wasn't an e-bike either. It had foot pegs and it used some mountain bike parts, and so it's not legal on the street, 100% not legal. No matter what anybody says, even if they put mirrors and lights and turn signals on it, it does not meet National Highway Transportation Safety Administration laws whatsoever. So those are not legal on the street, but we see that's the kids ride them on the street. They ride on the street to the dirt lot where they build a little track, and rip around on. That's why we're in the development of the Rawrr Mantis S, which is the first street legal lightweight electric. So just like that same platform, lightweight electric off-road, but it will be the first one ever that will be able to get a license plate on it, be fully DOT legal to be registered. But I think that when that happens, it is a great commuter bike for riding to school. My daughter's high school here, there's a half a dozen of those Sur-Rons, chained up on a fence out in front of the school. Kids just use their commuter to school, and then go up into the hills and rip around on them after school.
Doesn't sound like a bad day.
No.
Well, great. And what are you, in terms of like the more traditional segment of combustion engines, what do you see the challenges are these days for manufacturers?
Yeah, I think that the manufacturers are doing well with the products they're bringing to market. They understand the challenges with the bringing young people to market, and I think they're doing an extremely good job at trying to build products for the younger generation. One of the problems is, with the big, at least the Japanese, is that to develop a new product, the product development life cycle and the accompanying expense to bring a new platform to market is it's long and expensive. So 3 to 5 years and hundreds of millions of dollars. That's why a lot of this stuff is things that have already exist in Southeast Asia, platforms that already exist in Southeast Asia that they're finally bringing to the US. But I think they're bringing good product. Here is what we got with the 300s. If I was to buy a motorcycle today that maybe I used to run around a little bit, and then it was my track day bike, it would be a Ninja 400 for sure. 100% for sure. That is the most enjoyable. I had an opportunity to ride one at Chuckwalla, and is the most enjoyable thing to ride around there. So I think they're doing well. It's just it's educating. It's education. It's getting people that first taste of it. When I was growing up, and probably you guys as well, everybody has a story about riding their friend's mini bike or their friend's dirt bike, and if you didn't whiskey throttle it and crash into a fence, you had an amazing time, and it's intoxicating. You get hooked, and you want to do it again. So I think just getting more kids that first little experience, and that's what the Motorcycle Industry Council is trying to do right now. Get them that first taste of it. It's sort of like being a drug dealer. You give them the first little taste of it, and they're just going to want more.
Gateway drug.
That's a big, but then there's other hurdles to overcome. And one of the biggest ones is cost of insurance. Insurance is, the insurance cost is as much as your monthly payment on a small motorcycle. So there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's not our fault though. It's the cars are getting more expensive, so everything around it is getting more expensive. So I had, before my current truck, I had a 2006 F-150, and insurance was dirt cheap. And then I got my 2018 in 2018, and insurance was outrageous. And I asked them, I've never had an accident in my life. Why do I pay so much insurance? And the guy went like, Do you have a backup camera?
Oh, yeah,
There you go.
yeah. All the little stuff on it.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
the little
yeah,
stuff on it. That's what's
yeah,
expensive.
yeah.
Yeah, those are repairs. So if the Ninja 400 is a good gateway drug, uh, why no R6? Because that will be the next logical step.
Yeah, yeah.
They're making a new one, right? I mean, well, they're not making a new one, but they're selling it again. It's just not street legal.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just the race one, and you can't
Yeah.
get it here, only in Europe, I
Oh,
think.
really?
Yeah.
I'm sure if you cut
Yeah,
them,
So I
I'm
heard.
sure if you cut them a check, they'll ship you one.
yeah. And I think Moto America's done a great job with the Twins Cup there. That's a great. It's I'd love to see Moto 3 here, but that's um, Twins and the 300s. Those are great entry points into racing.
Mhm.
Six for decades. The smallest bike you could race in a national was a 600, and that's still way too fast for a beginner. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that there. Yeah, I'd like to take it even down one more notch, and it's just something that, one of these lightweight electrics, they only have 11 horsepower. If anybody's been to American Super Camp, it's basically riding a TTR 125, but with a lot more torque. And Anybody can ride it. It's the beauty of that bike is, you put someone like JD Beach on it on a little piece of dirt, and he can have a blast on it. But then you put someone who's never ridden a motorcycle before in their life, and you put it down into one of the lower level modes, ride modes, and they can putt around on it and have their first motorcycling experience without having to learn how to use a clutch. And um, yeah, I believe strongly in that product segment as an entry point here moving forward.
Where's that battery technology going? And can you pop the batteries now if you're doing a track there, or going on the track and you have like a spare battery charging while you're on the track?
Yeah. Yeah. You can. The batteries are swappable. You can swap a battery in less time than that takes you to fuel up a motorcycle. Only problem is the batteries are pretty expensive. But we would do at a track, we would do about 30 to 40 minutes of really hard riding, wide open, really hard riding. And then we'd be down to about 30% in the battery. And when you get down that low, it starts cutting your power, so you need to swap a battery. And you can do that. Um, but the cost of the batteries is pretty high, but it's um, definitely a way to do it. Yeah. Whenever we did media events, we would have a bunch of batteries on we'd always have batteries on chargers and always be pulling batteries out and put fresh ones in. Yeah.
I mean, from a pricing accessibility, does the e-bike and the battery cost less than, let's say, a Ninja 400?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
well,
So that's not too bad.
it's close. It's about $5,000, for that. So
Right. So that's not a bad setup. And
no,
frankly,
and
it
and
looks like a great way to actually learn properly to race, with more torque, lower speeds,
yeah,
focus on turning, and unlike what we did is, go straight to a Ducati.
yeah, yeah,
When you've never ridden a bike in your life, you
yeah,
go, oh, you got to get the 848 or
yeah, yeah,
1199.
yeah. Oh
I
yeah,
think
or back.
I think the Bill, you're a little out of touch with the average American when you go like, oh, $5,000, that's not too bad.
Well,
You
I mean,
know,
compared to what other bikes you would start racing with, right? If
Yeah,
you got to spend seven to get, I don't know
yeah,
what the Ninja 400 costs, but
yeah,
usually they're around 6, 7 grand at least.
yeah,
So if you got to spend that kind of money, you're still saving money in a sense, and you don't
yeah,
spend money on gas.
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the maintenance, there's zero maintenance. It's chains and brake pads essentially, and that's it. They're really, and you don't have to know anything about tuning to ride one. They're pretty easy. So you can suspension setup. You'd have to learn, but yeah, really easy. I remember the days back it was like 2006-ish. When the first bike for a lot of new motorcycle consumers was a GSX-R 1000. They wouldn't even have their motorcycle license yet, and they go to a dealership and they'd put a couple $100 down and get a revolving credit line and ride out of the parking lot on the fastest sport bike made.
Hey, it was
and a lot
12.
of
It
it
was
was
12 grand. It was 12 grand with a really nice loan of 675 APR, something like that, and
yeah, yeah,
make the
yeah,
payments.
so easy. And they qualify anybody,
Yeah.
and you could if you could fog a mirror, you qualify, and you pull out of the driveway at the dealership and grab a bunch of throttle and high side yourself, and then have $1,500 worth of bodywork damage. You gotta pay for as well.
Yeah.
Where is battery technology
Well,
going? Are we going to solid state or what's
Yeah.
we've been hearing about it forever.
Yeah, we'll go to solid state. We'll go to solid state for sure. Hyundai and Toyota are working on solid state batteries. They don't necessarily give much range or range advantages, but they will be more stable. And So I think we'll go solid state. There is so much money being invested into battery technology right now that it is not going to be long before, charging times are going to be greatly reduced, and battery density will be greatly increased, and it's we just have a lot of big investment capital groups spending a lot of money with labs to try to when there's that much money behind something, it's going to move forward for sure.
mhm.
Do you see this coming in time for California? Because when is California banning regular cars?
Is it 2035,
35?
2030 or
Yeah,
2035? Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. Do you see
yeah,
that coming in
yeah,
35, I think.
time or?
yeah.
Uh,
Uh, I don't think so. And one of the tough thing, one of the really tough things for motorcycles, street bikes, and battery technology. I own a Zero SRF, which I absolutely love. It's a fantastic sport bike. It has so much torque, so fun to ride. The technology is amazing, handles great. I had a chance to ride one up in the Sierra Nevadas and twisty roads, and it's just with the Zero folks, it's just the most amazing, most enjoyable motorcycle experience I've ever had, to be honest. The But motorcycles, a rider on a motorcycle going down the freeway has a significantly more drag, air resistant, wind resistance than a Tesla, that's in the lane next to them at the same speed. You think it's a small frontal area, it's not that bad, but motorcycles are horribly unaerodynamic. And the enemy of range is drag. Drag increases with the cube of speed. So the faster you go, the more drag you have, and the more battery drain you've got. So motorcycles are not nearly as efficient at high speeds as automobiles, and plus they're small, they can't carry a lot of battery. Zero's got about 18 kilowatt hours in there, but that's about all you're going to get in there without making something really big and heavy. And they are already a little chunky with that. So motorcycles, I don't see. I'm a big proponent of EVs. We've got 2 electric cars here, and I ride a Zero, but I don't see the motorcycle industry being able to make a complete switch to EV to 100% EV anytime soon. And I think we're going to get some motorcycles maybe given more lenient paths towards the EV conversion timeline. We did that with emissions. Motorcycles, as California really cracked down on emissions, cars really, really cut their emissions. They put big catalytic converters on them, and the motorcycle industry, thanks to the people like the Motorcycle Industry Council, sort of fought that, and a 1,000 cc 4-cylinder, put out considerably more emissions than any car on the road for a long time. So I think that will be a similar thing to happen in the EV world.
And they're gonna probably grandfather all the existing models, right? You can't sell new ones,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, for sure.
so
Yeah. Yep, that's why after when they did the red sticker, green sticker off-road regulations for dirt bikes here in California, where you couldn't ride, you couldn't ride a competition motorcycle or a two-stroke, in certain months of the year. But anything that was built before those green sticker regulations, so you'd have these really clean, TTRs and CRF-Fs, running around at Hollister Hills Off-Road Park, and then you'd have a 1977 Yamaha YZ400 that's creating a giant cloud of exhaust, burn through there. But it was grandfathered, so it was fine.
Yep. You still do that with cars. I mean, a car 25 feet or more,
Yeah.
then there's no carb, there's no requirement to test it. It's just
Yeah.
freehand. Well, thank God.
Yeah. So I'm sure that will occur, but yeah, I think that I was always I rode two strokes my entire career. I love two strokes, and I still love two strokes. I wish they were around still, but they were now riding electric bikes almost exclusively. It's really, really enjoyable. If anybody listening hasn't ridden one, they should try it. Just the amount of torque that they push down is so intoxicating, and it just the ride experience. I like to say it sort of distills motorcycle riding around down to its just simplest, most enjoyable form. In that, on a twisty road, accelerating, braking, cornering, all you have to worry about is just gas and brake. You're not shifting gears, you're not using the clutch, and you don't hear any noise. The only thing you hear is the wind. You just get into this feeling and this mode, when you're running back and forth through twisty corners that is I don't know, it's just sort of otherworldly. Yeah, it's amazing.
Sounds like e-motorcycles then are the equivalent of, for this generation, of what two strokes were for our generation. Hearing you speak about
Yeah.
it, minus the noise, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two strokes were a whole.
Something really. Sorry, go ahead.
Two strokes were a whole different beast. They were so tiny and so light, and the power, and they were hard to ride. Nothing happened until you hit 9,000 RPM, and then they had 100% of the power. But I'll never forget in 1989, I'd raced the Grand Prix that year. At the end of the year, Honda ran. There was a Willow Springs 24 hours, a 24-hour wear event at Willow Springs, and they asked me to ride. They brought an RC30 over. It's the first RC30 in the country, and myself, Randy Renfro, Rich Oliver, Mitch Boehm, who was editor for Motorcyclist at the time. He ended up going to work for Honda. We rode it, and Mike Spencer, former AMA Superbike racer, who worked for Honda. We rode it, and I had just come off as 3 years on 250s. I hadn't touched a four-stroke, and they bring the RC30 out, which was turned into the RC45, and it was, and they thought, oh, this thing is amazing, it's so good, it's fantastic. And I got on, and I took my first stint on it, and I came in and I said, this is a giant piece of junk. This thing, it's so heavy, it doesn't turn fast, it's hard to ride, and everybody couldn't believe that. But
and it slows down as soon as you let off the throttle.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the two strokes, we would just we would, at the end of the straight, you grab the brakes, and you don't use the clutch, you don't blip the throttle, you just, and now we have auto blip downshift for four strokes, so it's easier, but back then you had to use the clutch and blip the throttle. But with two strokes, you just pull up on the lever and just mash through the down through the gears, and not worry, not zero engine braking, so it didn't matter. Yeah, but yeah, two strokes. It's sad that they're gone. They were amazing.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about, and we've talked about favorite bikes already. You gave us a hint, but what other things have you ridden that have charmed you in the past?
Yeah. I probably my favorite road race bike ever was the Aprilia 250 that I raced. It was just a spectacular motorcycle that was so easy to ride, so tiny, and 198 pounds, and just this wonderful 198 pounds and almost 100 horsepower. It was fantastic. that was great. I think I really really enjoy on from a street bike perspective. I really enjoy riding adventure bikes because they really go well, around corners and super fun to ride on any twisty road. And then if the road turns to dirt, they're fun in a different way. And then you can get on the freeway and just be comfortable and cruise for 500 miles and not worry about your wrist cramping up. So I think adventure bikes are a great platform nowadays. And then, but again, from a sport bike perspective, and I've ridden, R1s and RSV4s and Panigales and they're wonderful and they're beautiful and they're amazing, but yeah, there's so much motorcycle there. There's so much motorcycle that, you know, nobody nobody this side of a Moto America or MotoGP paddock can get all the, can get everything out of those motorcycles. And thank goodness they have incredible electronics with traction control and lean angle sensing, ABS, and everything, or else they would be unrideable. Um, uh, Fun to ride occasionally, but if I went to a track day and there's a Ninja 400 or a 1,000 cc four stroke there, I'd jump on the 400 any day.
They are a lot of fun to ride and properly set up. They're actually amazing.
Yeah.
I've ridden some 300 and 400 stock, not
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah.
And then one that had the suspension done, and that was impressive actually.
Yeah, because ground clear, you run out of ground clearance on those things when you're pushing them hard. That's true. But everybody who asks me says, "Oh, I'm thinking about getting a street bike, first street bike," and I always tell them get a 300, get a KTM 390 or Ninja 400. It's the way to go.
All right, I got a manufacturing question for you.
Mhm.
How does a supply chain looks like? You've been a CEO of two different manufacturers. How does the supply
Yeah,
chain for a motorcycle look like? I mean, there's probably thousands of parts and hundreds of vendors, and how do you
yeah,
coordinate them? Where do all the parts come from? What
yeah,
how do you make the regulation work? I mean, it's I mean, it sounds like a lot of work for someone to push a product like that to the market. So how do you make sense of everything, and how do you coordinate everything?
yeah. Absolutely, it is extremely challenging, especially for a small company. A small startup company like I've worked for. And I'll use Vulcan. I'll use Vulcan as an example because we were trying to build that here in America and source it with as many American parts as possible. This is a Vulcan Grunt, which is just a play bike, utility bike. Very simple, but again, the sourcing of all the parts and components, it involves a couple of years of testing components from different vendors, building some of our own. And same with the big OEMs, they only actually manufacture a small number of parts themselves. They mainly buy from outside suppliers. Same car business is a little similar, but maybe not as much so. But the coordination of, you're absolutely correct in the supply chain of coordinating all the production, quality control, timing, um, uh, maintaining adequate but not um, overstocked inventory levels of all the parts, um, constantly uh, doing inventory management for basically just production line efficiencies and also auditing. You're getting audited on a regular basis, and you gotta count every nut and bolt that's getting ready to be installed on motorcycles. So it's a big process. It's a difficult process. And it's given me new respect for the folks that specialize in supply chain management. Smart people. Luckily, I didn't have to do that myself because it's not easy. Yeah, you think you look at the motorcycle you've got in your garage, and you look at all those parts and nuts and bolts on it. Those all had to come from different suppliers from all over the world and end up in one factory and sit there and be pulled from a bin right at the right time and installed on the assembly line. It's a big effort. Yeah.
Oh, what's the staff look like in both companies that you were CEO of?
Yeah. So at Vulcan, we were up to about 50 people. When this is when we were trying to manufacture ourselves in Austin, Texas, and eventually that got moved to Mexico with a third party manufacturing partner. But we built three lines for assembly, and there were about a dozen people on each line, maybe 10 people on each line that were building motorcycles. Um, in as far as Rawrr goes, all the manufacturing is done in China. There's a big team over there, though. There's 35 people that work for that help do our R&D and product development and manufacturing. So and those are just very small, small volume companies. You think about a company, putting out a lot of units, and the factories run, almost 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, it's an amazing operation. I had the chance to visit Ducati in Bologna, and they
Yeah,
gave us a tour of the factory. And they had an interesting principle. So they got people working on assembling a certain part of the engine, right? And they have these workstation, and the bin comes behind you with the appropriate parts, and the tools are hanging right above where you need to do the job. But which surprised me when we deemed that specializing in the task makes you better at it. They actually move people from workstation to workstation because they realize that people get bored and they start getting sloppy and get
yeah,
injured if they're doing the repetitive same work over and over and over again.
yeah,
And so they had, like, you would do 3 or 5 stations a day
yeah,
if you were working there, and you work your way down the line with the engine that you were building
yeah,
all the way down, which was surprising to me. I mean, did you guys do something like this, or were you
yeah.
more like, you're going to assemble a clutch and that's all you're doing? Well, not the electric clutch, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
battery control.
It was very important though to have specialists. Okay, this guy is the rear wheel guy. All he does is put the disc and the sprocket on the rear wheel and then puts it on the motorcycle. And we had at their stations, every nut and bolt had its own tool, and it was preset for that torque setting. You couldn't change the torque setting on the tool. The tool is set for the torque setting for that particular nut and bolt hanging from the ceiling. Um, I've seen some other factories where they basically, another method, they put all the parts in a circle and they put two people together in the middle, and they build the motorcycle up from there. And a lot of errors get made because they got to do everything, And when you have
Well,
people concentrating on.
I got one of those in the garage.
Yeah, yeah. My father had a Pomona, and yeah, it was just had to drop the front end of the bike out of or drop the engine out of the bike to change the oil filter.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
uh,
That's convenient.
that was a long time ago, but yeah, but what Ducati does two things really well. They do that thing where they move people and keep them fresh, and we didn't do that. That's great. And the other thing Ducati does well is a lot of coffee breaks. I've been to that factory, and there's a lot of coffee breaks, and so a lot of it's Italian coffee, it's espresso, so that probably keeps them sharp also.
Oh,
You,
yes. The
you,
productivity is going to be through the roof there.
Yeah.
espresso was invented. Espresso was invented in Italy, especially to make coffee breaks of workers shorter.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
the guy that invented the first machine, I
yeah,
think he had a factory, and his worker took too much time making coffee, so he invented that machine to make coffee quickly.
yeah. Concentrated. Yeah, yeah,
In a shortcut.
Yeah,
yeah.
get back to
That's a good
work,
one.
Giuseppe.
It's
There was a
that's a
famous,
good. Mhm,
I don't know if you've ever read it. There was a famous HBR, Harvard Business Review article
mhm,
about Porsche manufacturing.
mhm.
And they used to be, and I think that must have been late 80s. They were horrible in manufacturing. The factory was a mess. The QA was terrible. It was something like 70% of the cars that exited the production line needed some sort of rework.
Yeah,
They had this massive
QC
parking
problems.
lot where
Yeah.
they would put the car and then put a note on them that says, okay, here the mirror doesn't work, and here they're missing a wheel.
Oh,
And they would
yeah,
go back and rework them. It was expensive. And they rebuilt everything from scratch. The entire assembly chain, the computerized systems that went directly from their assembly line to the providers of the part, so that the guy who made a red door knew he had to deliver a red door on this bay for that assembly line at that day, at that time. And things came in sequence, and they were able to do a red car and a blue car and a green car because the parts were coming in at the right time and they were sequenced correctly and everything was computerized. I mean, it's a famous story because the amount of engineering and thinking and math
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
communication that got built into this was pretty groundbreaking.
I'll have to look that up because that's absolutely fascinating. Our lines and our processes were designed by a guy named Bruce Riggs. He was our COO. Bruce is the CEO right now of an e-bike company called Monday Motorbikes. And Bruce is he's one of the smartest people I know in the world. You know, he's a genius. And you know, he's the one who designed all those systems because not only is it you know, the assembly, but all the accounting behind it again of the inventory coming into the building. And then we had an offsite warehouse, you know, the inventory coming in the offsite warehouse, come into the building, go onto car, things are getting scanned at every step along the process. And Bruce designed all that. And he was a genius.
Yeah, inventory
Super
counts
genius.
against you as a liability when you do your
Absolutely.
taxes. That's why.
Don't want to have a lot of it
Yeah.
sitting in the warehouse. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you
There's a famous
manage?
book about it by I think Eli Goldstein called The Goal. One of early in my career, my manager made it mandatory reading, and it was about the same thing: manufacturing getting bogged down, and they couldn't figure the constraint points, and they had inventory building up in front of every stage of manufacturing, so it was costing them a lot of money.
Yeah.
They were operating at the slowest, and the way the guy figured out how to optimize things is he was walking with his kids in a scouting trip, and he saw how like the line would stretch. They would start within 2 feet of each other, working in Indian file, and then the line would stretch over time because somebody's slower, somebody's faster, somebody stops and tie their shoes, slows down everybody behind them, and then he tries to catch up, but the gap never closes. And all of a sudden, the line is a mile long,
I
and
see.
there's huge
Yeah.
distance. And he's like, okay, this is our problem. The machines don't operate at the same speed at every stage of the process, and so when you're trying to put something through, the slowest machine is going to dictate how things go, and it's going to slow the guys in front and the guys behind. And so they started working on equalizing this, and it's a fun book to read because it reads like a novel. So it's the adventure of this guy who gets hired into this factory that is in dire straits, and how he tries to fix things and can't figure it out, and
Yeah.
they reduce inventory and negotiate prices and do all that stuff, and they're still sucking up tons of cash.
Yeah.
And then he goes like, aha, and he gets that spark of an idea when he sees that line of kids walking.
Yeah, it's not as for me. It's not as obviously not as exciting. Probably for all the listeners, it's not exciting as racing motorcycles, but it's fascinating to me nonetheless. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's when our boring day jobs come in. And
I was going to ask
so
how
talking about
did you?
racing.
Sorry, I was going to ask how did you
Go ahead,
manage
John.
2020 with the chip shortage?
Yeah, so Vulcan was spun up at the start of 2020. That's when I was the CEO there. I was employee number one at Vulcan, and basically, so 2020 was us building that team, and we were trying to source as much as we could in the States, and we had some supply chain stress from the chip shortage. Thankfully, our motor controllers were the only thing that really had a lot of tech in it. It was a pretty simple motorcycle other than that. So we weren't affected too badly, but it did slow production down as it was worse sort of post-pandemic, when not post, but on the backside when we came out, when demand was so high from every sector for componentry and chips, and those component companies couldn't scale up fast enough. That was the more difficult point. It's just now really finally sort of settling down as far as supply and demand, and from component and chip companies like that.
Let's touch marketing. When you were at Bonnier, I'm sure you were you had good connections to all of the manufacturers and asked them for motorcycles to test, and gave them the spiel of, hey,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna give you more marketing, right? Now you're on the other side. Are magazines still effective? How do you go about marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've seen it go complete a massive change in the from the marketing side, from the media marketing side, the PR side. My first job, really in the motorcycle industry, I was going to UCLA at the time, and I was racing motorcycles, and I used to stop. I was riding an RZ 350 to UCLA along Sunset Boulevard. If anybody's from Southern California, they sort of know that route. And I would stop at the Peterson publishing offices. That's who produced Motorcyclist and Hot Rod and a bunch of enthusiast publications. So and would stop there and just bug Nick Einach and Mitch Baim to let me do something for them, and I did odd jobs for them, and then they finally let me write a little bit and then be a photo model for them. I'm on a lot of old covers of Motorcyclist from the 1980s. Um, so that was when magazine publishing was at its, everything was magazine. There was no digital, and the manufacturers would really work so hard, have big teams to make sure the magazines were supplied with fleets of motorcycles to test. They would Suzuki would deliver a motorcycle and let the magazine have it for a full year, just in hopes that it would show up for other stories. Oh, they're going to test an exhaust system. Maybe they'll use one of our motorcycles. It was just hoping for exposure in the magazines and a little bit of good coverage, and that was it. That was all there had. And then, when I took over, I worked for Cycle World in the 90s as selling advertising, and then I was brought back as publisher in 2010. And it was just when digital, the internet was starting to become more powerful and digital marketing was happening. Social media hadn't really taken a strong foothold yet, but we still were getting, magazines were the number one way to get um, good exposure for motorcycles, especially in big road tests, comprehensive road tests where, at Cycle World did the best road tests of anybody. Every single bike was run through, quarter mile testing, 0 to 60, 0 to 100, braking, top speed, testing at a secret top speed testing ground. Every single motorcycle that came through there, it would be weighed, it would be dynoed, it would, for a consumer could pick up a magazine and get every single piece of information about that motorcycle. Um, Unfortunately now, uh, as sort of attention spans got shorter, driven by digital publishing. There's still some, tests, like quote unquote tests happening of motorcycles online. They're nowhere near as exhaustive or as extensive as what they used to be. And then social media has taken over as well. And now the motorcycle companies are looking more for just impressions rather than coverage. I think what we still supplied folks like Motocross Action. This is in the off-road world, but Motocross Action dirt bike, they're still doing really good tests of bikes. But at the same time, we'd be sending bikes to influencers, and just in hopes that they'll make a Instagram post with our bike in it. Um, Celebrities, we send bikes off to celebrities and just pray that maybe they show up in we had committed a couple motorcycles to a famous pop artist, and a front wheel showed up in one of his posts, and that's all we got. But that cost us two motorcycles. Yeah, so it's changed a lot, and I don't think it's changed necessarily for the better. There's not as much good information about motorcycles out there as there used to be. But you got to play the game. You got to, as a marketer, you've got to be where the eyeballs are and fish where the fish are, and that's where they are.
But I remember reading articles where you could actually get a sense of how much fun the bike was or wasn't to ride from the writer.
Yeah.
and describing and doing some comparison and what they like, and you were able to make an informed decision even sitting at your house, because typically you take a bike out for a ride. I mean, unless you're in Southern California, most states you're going from red light to red light.
Yes.
If you're testing a bike, you
Yeah.
don't get an
Yeah.
impression of what the bike's going to feel like.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and the really eloquent writers did a great job at
Yeah.
explaining, from their expert point of view, what's good about it, and I miss that.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to take almost every motorcycle we got, whether it was a cruiser or a sport bike, it would do a day of street testing. It would do a day in local canyon roads of, twisty sport street testing. It would go to the drag strip. It would go to the top speed testing grounds, and it would go to a racetrack also and go and do laps around a racetrack and gather all that information and talk about the motorcycle from all those different points of view. And nowadays, it's maybe someone nowadays the OEMs don't lend bikes out for as long. So a media company, a digital media company, may get a test bike for a couple days, and they got to cram all that into all the photography and testing into a couple days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's changed quite a bit.
There's also so little people that I trust to tell me how the bike is, and social media influencers are not them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go and figure out if I like a motorcycle from a YouTuber or
Yeah.
from a pop artist. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go. I'm gonna go to a motorcycle that Nick Einach tests or Randy
Yeah.
tests or
Yeah.
Road Racing World test, and that's how I'm
Yeah.
gonna get my information. But I'm aware that we're not, we're not the rule. We're the exception. The rule takes their media from their phone where they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys like Nick and Don Canet, who was the test driver for Cycle for years. Don won some endurance championships. Don could go out race, and Don was an amazing individual. He would go out and he would do one warm-up lap, and he would do 6 hard laps on a motorcycle, and he will have gone as fast as he could go if he kept riding laps all day long. He had done his fastest lap already. He was just like this robot that could test so well like that. But then yeah, he just on the weekends he'd jump out and go win or wear endurance race. Yeah, we don't have that anymore. But it's also good to get the perspective of sometimes those guys only looked at like what it does from a sport perspective, but a lot of the people who come to motorcycling for the first time, they want to know like how easy is it to just ride around town, because that's all they're going to do. So we did miss a little bit of that, because every moto scribe was a hot rider, to get around a racetrack really well. Like you had to be a motorcycle journalist, you had to be able to get around a racetrack really well and shoot photos. You had to shoot photos. If you could do those two things, yeah, you could be a motorcycle journalist.
Well, speaking of testing bikes, so that was really the first time I got shocked. So I lived in Miami, but I would get my sports bike in LA and ride the Harleys in Miami because it's flat and straight, and
Yeah.
you need a radio and other things to keep you busy. But I was shocked. Like, how you go to a car dealership, and if they let you test the car, they're gonna put the sales guy right next to you, and you go around the block and you come in. And I go to Ducati Beverly Hills here, and the guy goes, "Well, here are the keys. Take this, Panigale, and then here's how you get to the canyon, and then you go up, and it should be like a 45-minute ride up the hill, probably take another 45 minutes to come back. So we'll see you in about an hour and a half." I'm like, "You don't know me. I just walked in here, and you're trusting me with a $25,000 motorcycle to go ride the twisties, and that's how you're selling bikes?" He's like, "Yep, that's what we do." I'm like, "That is amazing."
Yeah,
What
that
a
would
wonderful,
happen.
wonderful
You
experience.
can do that at a Ducati, maybe a BMW dealer. It may not happen at a multi-line dealer somewhere else.
The
But
big box guys, yeah.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
in
In a
Florida,
lot of places, and for decades, you couldn't even test ride a motorcycle. Just test rides just weren't allowed. That was too much liability.
yeah. Well, I was driving with this to comment from Gal, I put on the list here, was, your thoughts on the dealership model. Because there are talks, like Tesla, about going direct.
Yeah, yeah. It's something I've been very close to, and it's very challenging. But and it's something, the research that we did with the Motorcycle Industry Council, and The dealership model, it was great for my generation, for the older, I'm Gen X, the boomers above me, like, we had no problem going. I used to love going. I used to hang out at motorcycle dealerships. Like that was where I went and just hung out there. But nowadays, younger consumers, especially Gen Z, they don't want to walk into a retail establishment. It's just not, that's not how they shop. And they, especially in a product that they're unsure of and a little bit scared of, a motorcycle dealership experience is not the experience for them. And so, the problem though is it would be great to be able to sell motorcycles direct to consumer through like Tesla does in some but not all states. But the main reason is it's illegal. It's dealer franchise law in the majority of states in America prevent motor vehicles being sold direct to the consumer and not through a dealership.
Wow.
So through a independent franchise motor vehicle dealership. Tesla has skirted that law in most, but not all states, by saying, and this was originally set up so the manufacturer wouldn't compete with their dealers. Tesla's been able to do it though, because they said, well, we don't have any dealers. We're a new company. We don't have any dealers. We're not competing against anybody. And plus they had a fleet of attorneys, that went into every state and beat down these dealer franchise law walls. So Tesla was able to do it, but for a company like, say, American Honda, they could never, it's prohibited by law for them to sell a motor vehicle, whether it's a car or a motorcycle, direct to a consumer, and not use their dealership channel. So that's an unfortunate thing. I think it's something that holds us back a little bit in our business.
Yeah. Although I think from an educational perspective, dealers are a great place.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
make-
Yeah.
And you make friends. I mean, I've,
Yeah.
I've made friends that I rode with for a long time through the dealer. They advised on what boots to get for this type of bike and
Yeah.
get that helmet, and they ask you the question. I mean, you have basically your consultant there, and it's an involved sport. It's not like a car. You just get in and turn the key. You got to
Yes.
know the
Yeah.
gear to purchase, what type of
Yeah.
style of bike suits your riding, depending on what your plans are. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth
That's
here,
true.
and
That's true.
I
Yeah.
find it beneficial. I mean,
Yeah.
but again, like you, we're the older generation.
I also
Yeah.
like
It's very true.
negotiating. So I miss negotiating. You can't negotiate with a website. It's just a
That's
button
true.
that says buy now, right? But
Price is the price.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if you
Yeah.
go in and you go like, oh, you got a bike on the floor from last year model,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
much for me to take it home? So
Yep.
that
Yep.
that experience is something Gen Z, they don't like also. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not used to going in and saying, okay, well, will you throw in a helmet, as well, into the deal or something like that.
Yeah. 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 So why don't we talk a little bit about racing again? I know we've beaten the manufacturing and business side a lot.
Yeah,
What are your
we put
predictions
everyone to
for?
sleep with supply chain discussions. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah, but yeah,
interesting.
those are fun because we're business geeks. So
Yeah.
maybe not for the audience as much, but what are your predictions for next season? Moto America, World Superbike, and MotoGP.
Yeah, and I hate to say this, but I don't follow World Superbike much anymore. Bautista, I love to see Bautista do well,
Yeah.
because of his Grand Prix background, because he's a Aprilia, he rode 250s back a long time ago, so I love to see him doing well. But as far as MotoGP next year, I love seeing the Japanese, the European manufacturers doing well. I love to see, Ducati doing well and Aprilia doing well. I always root for Aprilia because that was the best season of racing I had was with Aprilia, back in the early days. But I worry a little bit that it's going to be a Ducati parade, next year, especially with Marquez, on a Ducati.
Mhm.
So, but I wish. I'm really sad that Suzuki is out of Grand Prix racing, and it doesn't look like they're going to be coming back anytime soon, because they made an amazing motor. Suzuki has brilliant engineers that really don't get to flex their muscles a lot, as much as other brands, and you look at what they built with that Suzuki MotoGP bike, a couple of years ago, that won races right up to the end there, with Alex Rins. It uh, Sad to see that gone. Honda's been so dominant for many years. It's okay for them to be off for a year or two, I think. Sad to see Yamaha also struggling. But,
Were you around that when Doohan was around?
yeah, my year in Grand Prix '89, that was his first year
Okay.
there. So he rode. Wayne Gardner was the lead rider, and Doohan was the new guy there. So
Okay, yeah, that guy is, whoa, my hero. I mean,
yeah, he's amazing. He was,
everything he did without moving his leg. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He
yeah,
was the guy that
yeah,
invented the thumb braking.
yeah. And what people don't understand, I haven't ridden a modern MotoGP bike, so I can't really say this. I've ridden, uh, you know, uh, V4, Panigales and RSV4s and that kind of thing. So that's about all as close as I've gotten to it. But the electronics make it a lot easier to ride. But those 500 years, there were just when they were really, really making a lot of horsepower, and zero traction control and narrow power bands. End of the Doohan, in the Doohan era there, they were really hard to ride, really, really hard to ride, and guys just getting high sided left and right. And
Yeah,
it was,
he was the one that moved to the Big Bang engine, and then everybody
yeah,
went
yeah,
went to a Big Bang engine, and then he went like, oh, okay, so now I'm gonna go back to the old engine, the
the
Screamer,
screamer,
and
yeah,
then you wanted
yeah,
that too, and
yeah,
everybody were like, well,
yeah.
can't do anything about that. That's doing.
Yeah, yeah, he was truly amazing, absolutely amazing. But yeah, I think MotoGP bikes nowadays, you just basically get that thing into the apex and stand it up and whack the throttle open. Again, I'm not trying to diminish what those guys do because they're so talented, far more talented than I ever would have been. Um, but it's more steering with lean angle rather, excuse me, accelerating with lean angle rather than the more meat of the tire you have on the ground, the more power it's delivering through that tire. So um, I'll never forget the first when traction control first started to come in, and I was working at Laguna Seca. This is 2005 or 2006, and Casey Stoner was on that Ducati, and he had come off 125s, and and uh, and I was standing, at the apex of, I forget which corner it was, somewhere in the infield there, and I saw him. It was the first time I'd ever seen this. He just run the thing in so hard on the front end, and then get to the apex and just whack the throttle open. Which was a year or two prior would have sent you skyward. And he would whack the throttle open, and then he just picked the bike up on the tire to picking the bike up and down. Adjusting his lean angle on the tire was his adjustments to the throttle, and I was like, wow, he was amazing with that, and I thought the game has changed now. That's for sure.
Funny, I was gonna say Casey Stoner because I remember his last year. I think it was on the Honda, right? When last championship
Yeah.
he won, and I watched him at on TV at Phillip Island,
Hmm.
and he was half a lap ahead of everybody else,
Yeah.
and just sliding all the time.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
tire was never gripped
Yeah.
100% to the ground, and he was in a completely different category. I mean, he was coming up with the bike already pointed on the slide and just shoot out, and everybody was just a spectator behind him, trying to just stay on the track and catch up. And recently, I think he was quoted complaining about all the technology now and saying, "Well, the
Yeah.
fun days of pre-traction control and where you
Yeah.
had a lot more things to do yourself were really
Yeah.
difficult and fun days of
Yeah.
racing."
Yeah. I mean, the years, when Nicky Hayden was riding MotoGP bikes, those were really, really, really nasty motorcycles, no before traction control. That was tough days, tough days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people, again, they say, oh, traction, we need to go back to the old days of no traction control. And But the with the amount of power that MotoGP bikes are making nowadays, they'd be completely unrideable. No one would be able to ride them without the electronic aids that are there nowadays.
I would say keep the traction control on, but the aerodynamics take them off. That's what I would
Yeah,
suggest
yeah,
because it's just
yeah.
what they're doing right now with the aerodynamics. It takes the
And I
fun out
think
of it.
that the chassis alterations also, the squat, altering the chassis,
Yeah.
on the corner exits and such. That's, began just with the bike on the starting line, and now every time they come off a corner, they squat that thing. I think that the shape shifting era, we're in that era right now, and that's a lot. I think that's something that can go away and no one would miss.
No doubt.
Except the riders, maybe.
I mean, they'll
Fans
all be
wouldn't
on
miss.
equal footing anyway, so it
Yeah,
won't matter much.
That was the main
yeah,
complaint of the
that's true.
Suzuki's when they were doing MotoGP. The main complaint was, hey, we can't do the squatting like Ducati
Yeah,
does. So,
yeah,
but hey,
Well, that
here's
happened in Formula One too at some point when they banned the active suspension when during
yeah,
the Honda, Prost, Senna
yeah,
days,
yeah,
they were
yeah,
dominating because they had the active suspension
yeah,
and they had to ban it. If
yeah,
you can't trickle, if it's not useful to trickle down the technology to street machines eventually,
yeah,
then why? I mean, I love the fact that
yeah,
it's the cutting edge of technology, but at the same time, do you really need a Ducati that squats when you're going to Starbucks or
yeah,
even
yeah.
riding a track day?
Yeah, yeah, and I'll remember back when I was racing, we spent some time in Japan, and we're sort of around that program with the it was the McLaren program with because they were using Honda engines, and those cars is right at the early stages of semi-automatic gearboxes, and they were uh, you know, not super reliable still, a lot of hydraulics. But they were at a point where they were using GPS on the cars. This is a long time ago, and they're using GPS, and they were saying that these cars will just know where they are on the track and know when to shift and when to not shift. And they were, even though that they were going to become automatics, but not by throttle or brake position, but by the car knowing what corner was coming up next and what gear it needed to be in and that kind of thing. And that got squashed. Yeah.
they built, I think, a few prototypes BMW of an M3 that went through Laguna Seca all by its own. And
Oh, right, right,
yeah,
right,
yeah, and
right.
they
Yeah,
put they
yeah.
put they put a few journalists in there that were like,
Mhm.
shitting their pants because
Yeah,
it was going real fast, but by itself. So I
yeah,
always said
yeah.
that I can't wait for self-driving cars to start showing up so I can cut them off on the road. See see how they deal with that.
Or how do you you put a cone on their hood. There's something
uh,
where you like
I don't know.
you put a traffic cone on the hood and it completely shuts the autonomous vehicle down.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Oh, really? Because it sees the traffic cone and thinks it's a obstacle they have to stop for.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
Yes.
I
I
was at
don't
the
trust
J
it 100%. We have it at our battery car, and many times more than I'd like on the highway, you'd be very close to the divider, and all of a sudden you're on a turn, and the car goes take over immediately,
yeah,
and let's go of the autopilot,
yeah.
and
I
that's a little
think
scary with that.
from an autonomous driving perspective, I think that we have it on our cars, and it's great for the freeway, but for full self-driving on city streets, it scares me a lot. I think there's just so many variables, whether it's a kid on like I came around a corner the other day in our neighborhood, and there's a kid laying down on a skateboard who had crossed the center line of the turn, and stuff like just weird stuff like that that's not expected. I don't know if it'll ever get there, but uh, and plus it's fun to drive. Like it's really fun to drive. Why, I enjoy driving. I don't want the car to drive for me.
Well, you're right. At the highway, at traffic, it's a great aid because then you can do other
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
But
yeah,
other than that, driving is fun. That's the whole
Didn't I
yeah.
point.
send you that article that I read the other day that Ford's developing autonomous driving cars so they can drive away from you if you miss a payment? That's true. It'll,
Yeah,
it'll go
yeah,
back to the factory. It
Yeah,
repossesses
they
itself.
filed a patent
Yeah.
filed a patent for it. That was the story. Yeah. And I heard the rumor there was a kill switch coming, becoming mandatory, but that was debunked. Apparently, Biden was pushing for it, and yes, it's not. Nobody wants it.
Mm. It was the Japan Mobility Show a month or two ago. I guess it was back in November, and the uh, Yamaha was showing off. Yamaha seems to have this technology down the best, but a lot of self riding motorcycles that can stand up on their own. They've shown it in some proof of concepts, and now they had some scooters that actually did that. So you didn't have to know how to balance, ride a bicycle and balance. You could just jump on the scooter and it would balance for you. Pretty fascinating.
Didn't they have a robot riding
R1,
Rossi's bike, or
the R1, yeah.
yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they
Yeah.
had a Honda that would just follow you around. You would just walk, and it would just an electric Honda that would just ride behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of robot stuff. The Kawasaki had a robot, believe it or not, at the Japan Mobility Show, and it was scary looking. I'm firmly convinced that we're going to be murdered by robots here, not in the not too distant future. After seeing some of the things they're doing now.
Yeah, yeah. Where's Arnold Schwarzenegger when you need him?
Well, you know what? I keep hearing that, and
It's coming.
everybody out there, just relax. AI is not what you think it is. Okay.
Yeah.
AI, it's just reading the internet like you and Googling it and figuring out how to sound smart when it gives you false information. So AI is not at the
Well,
point, it's not the point
until
of
you see
killer
that
robots.
little Boston Dynamic dog, the
Yeah.
robot dog with a
Yeah.
machine,
They
50 cal machine
they
gun on top.
communicate now between themselves. You know that
Yes,
in packs.
and they shoot,
Yeah.
and they compensate for recoil before they shoot. You can
Yeah.
see the dog squatting,
Yeah.
and then the shot comes out, and then he straightens up afterwards.
But it's not
Not a good thing.
real AI. It's just a lot of software. So real AI
Yeah.
is very little software and just modeling and training on that modeling from a lot of data. So that what they're doing is just regular software. So
Yeah.
AI is very misunderstood.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. We were trying to come up with some imagery for a Rawrr ad that we were doing, and we couldn't get we couldn't find the right people. We needed a certain type of person, and we couldn't find the people. We didn't have the time to get out and do a shoot, and our digital director, who's a great guy, and he goes, let me have AI take a shot at this and see what we can get out of it. And what he supplied back to us was frightening. It was frighteningly good in some ways, but frighteningly weird and scary in other ways. And there happened to be one particular photo. I told him, I said, this is the last thing that we're going to see here at Rawrr before we get murdered by our AI creations here. Is this dude on this Rawrr here? But we didn't use any of it because it wasn't quite there. But interesting to see.
We have on our Instagram account, we have a lot of AI photos, and for anybody that's listening, if you want to generate an AI, just go to Bing, log in, ask it for an image, and it'll make you an image.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, a good percentage of the questions in this interview were AI generated.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, AI missed the Ducati and Alpine Stars thing, so.
Oh, I'm going to tell you where I found it. I forget now where I found it, but it was in some sort of press release when you joined the Motorcycle Industry Council. There was a press release coming out, and it was in there. So false information probably was generated by Washington Post.
By the Japanese.
Yeah, Washington Post or MSNBC or Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, great. Anything else we want to talk about?
No, I'm just happy to be working in power sports. I took a couple years off and worked in another passion industry of mine. But power sports is great, just because, again, because of the people. You guys know this.
Yeah, you get to be on a podcast and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just appreciate you guys having me, and hope we reach a lot of young riders or people considering riding that just know riding a motorcycle is really it's a great form of transportation. It's a great form, you ride a motorcycle to work, you get there refreshed, energized, ready to start your day. You sit and stop and go traffic in a car, and you get there and you're already bored and worn out.
Yeah. That's a
Is there
great pitch,
anything
actually.
is there anything you're working on or trying to get into or have plans into the future that you didn't share and you want to share here?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think one of the things that I'm trying to work on is continued advancement of in the EV world, especially in two wheels. It's more challenging than four wheels. There's not as much investment capital behind it. And there's some great companies making some great bikes, but the consumer acceptance of electric and motorcycle is a lot more challenging than in four wheel. Um, and so I'm trying to commit myself to pushing electric vehicles forward. And like we discussed earlier, we're not quite there yet with technology, but we will be there very soon. And it's a great way to ride a motorcycle, and it'll open a motorcycling up to a whole new group of people that don't even know what a clutch is, let alone have never used one. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I love what you said about arriving at work refreshed and energized and happy. Um, Cheaper than a car.
Yeah,
So
cheaper than a car.
for the
Yeah.
new generation, this is
Yeah.
not a bad choice.
Parking's easy, and and the reason you get there refreshes, it demands attention, demands more attention. Riding a motorcycle in traffic, it demands an attention level like a MotoGP rider. Just monitoring everything that's going on around you in addition to what you're doing with the motorcycle. And I don't mean like speeding or that not never just riding normally. When I ride a motorcycle, I pretend I'm invisible. I pretend nobody sees me, and I'm looking at every single vehicle out there, and I'm assuming they're going to do what they should not be doing, and what's my escape path. And so I'm always thinking about that. So I get to work, and my brain is already turned on and ready to go. And I ride a motorcycle or a bicycle to work. Every single day. I try not to ever drive a car. So yeah.
Yeah. On that note, though, we got to figure out is how to make our podcast digestible for the younger generation.
No
Probably make it like
thanks.
35 seconds long, and
No thanks.
you know,
Those
Just need
those younger generation first they need to figure out what gender they are. Then they can.
you just need Justin Bieber on the podcast, and then you guys
Justin Bieber
will.
is
oh,
already
that's
old, right?
fantastic. Yeah, but who's gonna listen to
Yeah,
anything
he's
for an hour
yeah
and a
he's
half?
old. Yeah, that's true.
It's already old. They,
Yeah.
they, they have other heroes, Taylor
Yeah.
Swift and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, get Taylor Swift on the podcast, then you're
You're gold.
off to the races,
Yeah, that's all right.
so to speak.
How can
Well,
people get in
terrific.
touch with you?
Yeah, reach out to me on social media. I'm on Instagram, A Leisner. I'm on TikTok, but not necessarily as a creator. I create pictures of my dog. That's about the limit of my TikTok creations. But yeah, I spend a lot of time on Instagram at A Leisner. Reach out there. Love to chat. And LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn as well. A Leisner also, yeah, Andy
Sound
Leisner.
sounds good. All right,
Well, I'm already following you, so
there you go.
seen the dog.
This
Yeah.
has been another episode of Edge Grip Podcast. Thank you guys for listening.